I am an astronomically huge fan of the New Mutants comics, especially the classic and current volumes. In particular, Dani Moonstar is my favorite Marvel hero of all time. As a woman-aligned Indigenous person, she means the world to me. So to say I'm disappointed in this so-called New Mutants film adaptation of 2020 would be an understatement. I am not disappointed, I am disgusted by just how offensive this film is, both in general and specifically in regards to calling itself a New Mutants film. At this point, I'm pretty sure the pent-up rage I have directed at this film can only be exhausted by talking about it. So, here we are. The film features 5 of the core 9 New Mutants from the classic comics. Well, at least in name. There's Dani Moonstar, Roberto da Costa, Sam Guthrie, Ilyana Rasputin, and Rain Sinclair. Members of the team not included are Shan Kwai-Man, Amara Aquila, Doug Ramsey, and Warlock. Julio Richter and Tabitha Smith joined the team late in the series as well, but are not typically regarded as core members. Shan is notably the only one of the original 5 missing from the film, instead replacing her with Ilyana, despite even being the team's first leader. Imagine making an original 5 X-Men film with Wolverine instead of Cyclops. But right now, let's compare the 5 characters in the comics to their film counterparts. Dani Moonstar, aka Mirage, is a Cheyenne girl from Colorado. Originally, her power set was limited to manifesting illusions of the deepest fears of a person, though as the classic New Mutant series unfolds, this evolves to include any illusion she can think of. In classic X-Force, her powers evolve further and she learns to conjure psychic arrows that can paralyze their targets in fear, a skill she frequently uses in modern comics now. Oh, and she becomes a Valkyrie who can sense death. Because of her struggle managing her illusions when her powers first developed, Dani spent most of her time in isolation, with only her grandfather as company after her parents mysteriously disappeared. Spoiler alert, they were eaten by a demon bear. Then her grandfather is murdered too, leading Dani to reluctantly go to Xavier's school. Dani can come off as abrasive and rebellious because she is very iron-willed and has a strong sense of her own morality. From the very moment she joins the team, she's not afraid to challenge even Professor Xavier. These traits are part of what makes her a great team leader, which is the role she plays for the majority of the classic New Mutants run. But for all her outward confidence, deep inside, she struggles with a desire for people to like her. Dani develops a particularly strong relationship with Rain in the comics. They call themselves soulmates and share a telepathic bond when Rain is in her wolf form. However, in modern comics, they drift apart, and it's only very recently that they've started to get close again. In the film, they overtly become a couple. Dani barely has any agency in the film. She's like your typical soft-spoken new girl in a CWI school drama where things happen to her but never really about her. I can't really identify a personality for her because she has none. I feel it's also worth pointing out that when paired with the racist casting of Henry Zaga as Roberto, which we'll get to in a minute, it's highly suspect that they also decided to cast a light-skinned native actress to play a dark-skinned native character. What makes it more suspect is that the other choice was True O'Brien, who is not even native. Josh Boone openly confirmed having a casting call open to non-natives for Dani in the same interview when he defended the racist casting for Roberto. I refuse to pat them on the back for Dani's casting when there is so much bullshit behind the scenes and when paired with flat-out racist casting elsewhere in the film. Roberto da Costa, aka Sunspot and often called Berto or Bobby, is an Afro-Brazilian boy who was established in New Mutants number 2 to be the youngest of the group at just 13 years old. He has solar-powered super strength, and when using his powers, his body turns into complete shadow. Mutant abilities often appear for the first time in stressful situations, and in Bobby's case, his powers manifested in the middle of a soccer game when assaulted by racist players in the other team. As if this isn't traumatic enough, he then lost his girlfriend when she jumped in front of a bullet for him. Juliana's death has haunted Roberto ever since. Because nothing can ever be easy for Berto, to top everything off, this kid has major daddy issues. Rightfully so, given his father decided to join the Hellfire Club, arguably the X-Men's second most famous enemies only behind the Brotherhood. And boy, do they ever want Roberto to join them. Spoiler alert, they eventually get what they want. Roberto acts like he's the coolest kid on the block in public, while in private deeply struggles with, well, everything I just said. He can be a bit of a hothead who, like Dani, is not afraid to challenge authority, especially if it's in the name of sticking up for his friends. Roberto is extremely loyal to those he cherishes. He is also a huge Magnum PI fan, and yes, that is a defining trait of his personality. Just like Dani and Rain's strong relationship, Roberto and Sam become extremely close too. Unlike Dani and Rain, they stay a great team. In modern comics, Roberto and Sam both joined the Avengers for a time together, with Berto becoming the leader of one of the branch-off teams even. Quite an accomplishment for a kid who Xavier once wrote an entire report on the likeliness of becoming a supervillain. In the comics, Roberto's father is black and his mother is white, and he himself has dark skin like his father. He makes his way through the world with a number of labels: black, Latino, mutant, and it gets complicated for him sometimes. In the film, this so-called Roberto da Costa is played by a Brazilian actor, yes, but he is not Afro-Brazilian. Director Josh Boone defended his choice of casting Zaga to play a black character, saying, "I don't care so much about the racism I've heard about in Brazil, about light-skinned versus dark-skinned. To me, I wanted to represent Brazil in a positive way, and I wanted to find somebody who seems like they could look like a guy who has a silver spoon in his mouth, who has a really rich dad, and Henry just exemplified all these things." No amount of Brazilian identity that Zaga has within him can make up for the fact that he is not Afro-Brazilian like Roberto. No amount of Zaga looking rich, whatever that means, can make up for the fact that he is not Afro-Brazilian like Roberto. No amount of denial that racism exists in Brazil can make up for the fact that Zaga is not Afro-Brazilian like Roberto. Roberto is of African descent. Zaga is not. It is the complete and total erasure of a crucial part of this character's story and who he represents. It's racist casting. The racism is enough to end a discussion, but oh no, the butchering of this character doesn't even end there. Roberto in this film is an asshole. The only one character he isn't a jerk towards is Sam, so at least they get a small sliver of the comic book bond there, but it's a pathetically small sliver. What really gets me though is they completely changed his powers. They switched his powers with Amara's in the comics. What the fuck? They did this just so they could say he was responsible for killing his girlfriend because he got too hot and burned her. Oh my god. Okay, we gotta keep going. Sam Guthrie, aka Cannonball, is the eldest child in a huge family, born and raised in Kentucky. When his father died from black lung, 16-year-old Sam dropped out of school for the coal mines himself to support his mother and siblings. On his first shift, though, the mine collapsed and Sam's powers manifested. He has the ability to basically turn himself into a human rocket, which includes being non-vulnerable when blasting, as he is sure not to let anyone forget. Sam pretty easily slips into the big brother-ish role, probably because he's used to having a group of younger siblings hanging around him. Sam cares about being seen as respectful and responsible more than any of the others, though does not always succeed. He also tries to maintain a cheerful and hopeful attitude. While Sam is a little too insecure and unsure of himself to be much of a leader at first, by the time Classic X-Force comes around, he really steps into his own and becomes a pretty solid one. While Sam's background is mostly accurate to the comics and the film, the difference being that in the film he is the reason for the mine's collapse and his father's death, personality-wise he is very angsty. At one point he cries in front of a mirror and then uses his powers to knock himself out. Rain observes that Sam uses his powers to hurt himself a lot.
Not so good at landing though. Is this like practice? I don't know. Sometimes it seems like he's out here just trying to hurt himself.
Not sure how, when he's supposed to be nigh invulnerable when blasting. He spends the film beat to shit because of this. Ilyana Rasputin, aka Magic, is the younger sister of the X-Men Colossus, born in Russia but was sucked into the other dimension Limbo as a child. While only seconds passed on Earth, 7 years went by in Limbo, where she was raised by the demonic sorcerer Belasco as his apprentice. At age 14, she rebelled against Belasco and became the new ruler of Limbo. Returning to Earth as a teenager, she joins the New Mutants. Ilyana has the power to teleport herself and others through time and space, though she must always pass through Limbo to do this. She is also a master sorcerer and wields her iconic soul sword. Ilyana has a tendency to self-isolate and spiral into a session of self-hate, believing herself to be inherently evil because of her traumatic time in Limbo. She is slow to trust others and let them into her inner thoughts, feeling like she needs to tackle everything alone, but over time comes to greatly appreciate the support of her friends. When she's not in a depressive state, she has a mischievous and playful spirit. While in the comics, Danny is the first member of the New Mutants that Ilyana comes to trust, in the film, Ilyana is a racist bitch for some reason.
Don't know how to grow weed, do you?
No.
What kind of Indian are you? Aww, this isn't the hospital, Pocahontas. It's a cage. Hey, Standing Rock. You want a buffalo wing? You people love buffalo, don't you?
She's also portrayed as being this aloof nutcase that talks to a puppet version of Kitty Pryde's dragon in the comics, Lockheed. Instead of being taken by Belasco, she was taken by a group only referred to as the Smiling Men. Who are the Smiling Men, you are probably wondering? Who the fuck knows? It's never explained. Limbo is the place she created herself, though the details of that are also never explained. Finally, there's Rain, aka Wolfsbane, who was raised by the horribly abusive Reverend Craig in Scotland. The Reverend instilled in her a belief that any abnormality was sinful. Fast forward to Rain developing her mutant power to turn into a wolf, or a hybrid state between human and wolf, and the Reverend led the town in a deadly chase after her with guns and torches, branding her as a witch. Rain was shot, but saved and patched up by Moira McTaggart from the X-Men fame. Rain comes to see Moira as a mother figure she never had. Rain is a sweet and innocent girl who tries to think best of everyone except herself. Rain believes that her mutant powers are a curse from the devil and that she is being punished for wickedness inside her. For a long time, this is her most defining trait. It takes years of character development for her to come out of this line of thinking, but eventually she does. Unfortunately, some writers, like Peter David, forget this character development, and in modern comics decide to write Rain as a religious zealot whose only purpose is to cause homophobic drama at the expense of Richter and Shatterstar. Yes, that's right, Rain is a homophobe who thought Shatterstar was stealing Richter's soul by turning him gay. Rain is a homophobe, but the film decided to put her in a sapphic relationship with Danny, while at the same time completely excluding the canonical lesbian character, Shan, who I might add also has a lot of romantic chemistry with Danny in the comics, because Danny is so obviously very gay too. And that's the hill I will die on. But I digress. Rain's film counterpart is easily the closest to her comic self of the bunch, both backstory-wise and personality-wise, but that's not saying much. There is one other character featured in the film, but she is not a character from the New Mutants comics. She's an X-Men, Cecilia Reyes. I'm not overly familiar with Cecilia like I am the other characters here, but I know damn well enough that she's not a villain. I don't know why on earth Joss Boone decided to make her such, when he could have used plenty of other characters in her place, or hell, just make up a new one. Cecilia is also a black woman, which Alice Braga is not. So yeah, more racist casting. I'm starting to suspect Boone has something against darker skin. But back to the New Mutants. In case you didn't pick up on the thread linking all of them together, these are some seriously traumatized teens. It doesn't end there. Shan lost her parents in the Vietnamese War and was raped by pirates when trying to flee to the US. Amara was almost killed in a sacrificial ritual to Selene, only saved when her powers manifested. Warlock fled to Earth because his father wants to kill him. Olio was kidnapped and tortured by an anti-mutant militia known as the Wraith. Tabitha grew up in an abusive household until she ran away from home, living on the streets for some time. Trauma is basically the requirement to be a new mutant. Doug is the only member who doesn't have anything dark going on, up until he fucking dies. This is what separates the New Mutant comics from other young superhero teams. They've never been afraid to get serious, tackling things like abuse, suicide, rape, drugs, child death. So I can't say I'm surprised that the so-called New Mutants film also attempts to do something a bit darker. Tone-wise, it would have been fitting if it was at all competent. Unfortunately, it starts and ends with the tone, because everything about this story is just awful. The film opens with a racist fake Native American proverb, giving you a taste of what's to come.
There's an old Native American proverb that says, "Inside every person, there are two bears."
Then we're thrown into a chaotic scene where Danny's reservation is destroyed and everyone is killed while she alone escapes. The scene transitions to Danny waking up handcuffed to a hospital bed, which she drags around a room while looking around in what I'm pretty sure is supposed to be comical, but is actually quite disturbing imagery. We're introduced to Dr. Reyes, who confirms to Danny that she is the sole survivor of her community and that Danny is a mutant. She then explains that there are other kids in the facility they're in, built for troubled young mutants. Danny wants to leave, but Reyes says she will not allow it until she assesses Danny is not a danger. We meet the other New Mutants in group therapy. Danny's first introduction to the group is Roberto laughing at her name, then saying she's probably addicted to drugs and sex.
How fucked up are you?
Ileana.
Drugs, I bet. Or an info, maybe. Hopefully.
So, just to be clear, we're 10 minutes in and we've got a fake native quote, the mass destruction of an entire native community, the kidnapping of a young native girl forced into a containment in a school-like facility, making fun of said native girl's surname, and assumption that said native girl has addiction struggles and sexualizing her. Gotcha. Reyes asks Ileana to show Danny around the school, and Ileana reluctantly agrees, but makes it clear that she hates Danny for no apparent reason other than that she's racist, I suppose.
Blockade. Oh, I know. I hate her too.
Danny decides to make a break for it, but finds out the hard way that there's a force field surrounding the facility. Ileana laughs and teleports away. Apparently Rain can now teleport too, because she goes from watching Danny climb the clock tower from the ground with the intention of committing suicide to magically appearing behind her. Rain talks Danny out of it, and they spend the rest of the day together gossiping about the others. Danny has nightmares about the destruction of her community. This triggers her powers, and Sam is sucked into an illusion that he's back in the mines he worked in. Danny finally stands up for herself when Ileana hurls racist insults again. Ileana jokes that Danny's father sexually abused her, so Danny steals Ileana's puppet and the two get in a fight. Reyes shows up just before Ileana attacks Danny with her soul sword, then puts both of them in solitary confinement. Yes, both of them, for some reason. We get a brief flashback to Ileana as a child, insinuating that she herself was sexually abused by the group she calls the Smiling Men. Again, we know absolutely nothing about these fuckers. Meanwhile, Danny's power activates again through the night, and this time gives herself a nightmare of the demonic bear. Reyes takes blood samples and reminds Danny that she's dangerous, and that's why she's being locked up, until they can figure out how to control her powers. Rain enters the empty confession booth at the chapel and starts listing out her so-called sins when an illusion takes over where she hears the voice of Reverend Craig calling out our witch. The group of New Mutants sneak up to the attic where they start playing with a lie detector test. They ask Roberto how many girls he's been with, and he gets caught lying. Sam takes a turn and talks about his father dying. Danny tells a story about a demon bear her father told her when she was little, and Ileana reveals that she killed 18 men. This is supposed to be a character development scene, I think? In the next group session, Sam asks why he can't go home, and then spirals into talking about his nightmares. He ends up storming out. That night, Ileana says she spiked the tea Reyes was drinking. No, we don't actually know how she accomplished this. So the New Mutants have a party to the house. Sam reveals to Roberto that he killed his father and crew in the mines. Rain and Danny sneak outside to lay down and watch the rain's effect on the barrier. They share a kiss. Roberto and Ileana also share a kiss in the pool, but then Roberto starts steaming up. He explains that he accidentally burned his girlfriend to death. It turns out that this Ileana was just an illusion, and she morphs into his dead girlfriend. This triggers Roberto's powers to activate, which again, I will remind you, are actually Amara's powers. Sunspot has super strength, not fire. What are you doing, Boone? Reyes puts him out by pushing him into the pool, which I will remind you he was just in before and had no effect at all, and then puts Ileana back in solitary confinement for spiking her drink. The next day, Reyes begins medical experimentation on Danny, triggering Danny to have visions of young mutants being trained as soldiers. She has a breakdown and her powers surface again, creating illusions for Ileana and Rain. This time the illusions take guard form, and Rain is branded with another witch mark on her neck by the summoned Reverend. Ileana figures out it's Danny doing all this and attacks her, dragging her to limbo. Danny uses her powers to scare Ileana into letting her go, and Reyes knocks Ileana out with a sedative. Danny brings the puppet Lockheed back to Ileana. They bond a little bit, teaching the audience that if you're just nice to your racists, they will magically get better. Reyes gets a notification from her mysterious superior with instructions to collect further DNA samples from Danny and then kill her. It's revealed that she's working for the Essex Corporation, a nod to Mr. Sinister that will never be fulfilled. At the same time, Danny tells Rain that she suspects there are ulterior motives behind this facility. Despite this, she allows Reyes to take her to the underground lab for some reason, where Reyes compares Danny to a feral dog that needs to be put down. While this is happening, Ileana and Sam are chased by another illusion of Ileana's Smiling Men. Rain uses her super wolf earring to find Danny's location. She attacks Reyes and saves Danny from the brink of death. Ileana teleports away, and Sam uses his powers to plow through the men. It meets up with Roberto, who is furiously trying to get outside. They reunite with Ileana, who teleports back to them wielding her sword. The old group meets up in Reyes' office, and she herself tries to flee. The New Mutants decide to kill Reyes as the only way of escape. Rain uses her powers to track Reyes down, and the group confront her about the Essex Corp. Reyes uses her force field powers on all of them and says that she will let them go if they surrender Danny, because Danny needs to die. But then the outer barrier is breached somehow by Danny's demon bear and eats Reyes in what is easily the funniest scene in the entire film. The demon bear continues its attack, but Danny won't wake up. Ileana orders the others to go take Danny away while she attacks, because we're supposed to see her as a hashtag girl boss now. Also, Lockheed is a real dragon, suddenly. No explanation is given for that either, folks. Rain tries to wake Danny up, but the others fight off the demon bear, and it finally works after Danny dreams of her father encouraging her. She confronts the demon bear and manages to soothe it out of existence. The film ends with the New Mutants leaving the facility and a second voiceover of the racist fake native proverb again. Jesus fucking Christ. So, yeah. A messy plot with pacing issues, bland characters, unanswered questions, and racism. This is what the film turned the New Mutants into. Not that there isn't racism in the classic comics too, mind you. It's in there, but the comics have the excuse of being dated, whereas this film does not. This film should know better. Josh Boone should know better. So what's the alternative? Call me crazy, but why not simply adapt from the original graphic novel? No, I'm not crazy, because the old guard proved you can do that and pleased comic fans and new fans alike. The original New Mutants graphic novel is a prime target for adaptation because it's the perfect setup in terms of establishing characters and tone in an easy-to-follow story, which is what you want from a starting point to a potential new series. The filmmakers would only have to make a few moderate changes, like adding Shan's backstory since she was established prior to the graphic novel, for example. In terms of what we have, there is no comic book story equivalent to whatever the fuck this film was trying to go for. No, I refuse to call it the Demon Bear arc just because there's Demon Bears present, any more than to call X-Men Origins Wolverine a proper telling of Wolverine's origin story just because Weapon X is involved. Not that I would want the Demon Bear arc adapted anyway. The racism present in the comics I mentioned? Yeah, prime example. But this is just Josh Boone's fanfiction. And I'd be fine with that, really, if it wasn't done so fucking poorly. I hate this film to its fucking core, and Boone can meet me in the fucking pit. Anyways, read the comics. They are so much better.